I never thought I would spend a Christmas like this, sitting alone in my quiet apartment, the scent of pine and cinnamon drifting from my neighbors' homes, while my own house felt cold and empty. At 65, I had lived through enough holidays to know the warmth of family gatherings, yet this year was different. This year, I was invisible. I had spent weeks preparing for Christmas in my own way. I had picked out gifts for my children, carefully wrapped each one, and even found the perfect little present for my granddaughter. I had made a shopping list, stocked up on groceries, and set aside enough for a proper Christmas feast. I wanted to see my family happy. That's all I ever wanted. The first sign something was wrong came a few days before Christmas. I called my daughter, Laura, to confirm our plans, only to hear a vague excuse about her being busy with work and having last-minute things to take care of. My son, Michael, was even less forthcoming, brushing off my questions with a short, "We'll see, Dad." Their voices carried a distance I had never heard before, an unfamiliar tone that made my chest tighten. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that everyone gets busy around the holidays. I told myself that maybe the kids wanted to surprise me, that perhaps they were planning something special. But deep down, a small, nagging feeling wouldn't leave me alone. On Christmas Eve, I decided to stop by my old house, the one I had built with my own hands so many years ago. The lights twinkled along the roof, casting a cheerful glow into the winter night. I parked the car and walked to the front door, the familiar crunch of snow under my boots somehow amplifying my unease. When I rang the doorbell, I was met not with hugs and laughter, but with Laura's hesitant smile and Michael's stiff nod. There was an odd stiffness in the air, as if they were afraid of what I might say. Inside, the house smelled of roasted turkey and freshly baked pies, a scent I had chosen for the occasion myself but hadn't been allowed to contribute. The tree was beautifully decorated, the ornaments catching the soft glow of the fairy lights, yet it all felt foreign to me. I asked casually about the preparations, trying to sound lighthearted. "Looks wonderful," I said, forcing a smile. They nodded politely, but avoided eye contact. It was then I noticed the subtle hints, the glances they shared, the secretive whispers. My heart sank when I realized something was terribly wrong. The truth hit me in the quiet moments, when Laura stepped aside to talk to her husband and Michael leaned over to check his phone. They hadn't invited me. Not intentionally, perhaps, but unmistakably. They had planned Christmas without me. My chest tightened, a mixture of hurt and disbelief washing over me. The man who had raised these children, the man who had sacrificed so much for them, was now left on the outside. I wanted to speak up, to confront them, but the words caught in my throat. I felt a strange mix of anger and sadness, the kind that doesn't scream but gnaws quietly at your insides. So I stood there, pretending everything was normal, while inside I reeled from the realization that I had been excluded. After what felt like an eternity, I retreated to a quiet corner, sipping my coffee and watching my family laugh and exchange gifts. I watched the joy they shared, the smiles, the hugs, and it hit me even harder. I had provided all the gifts, paid for the food, and yet I was merely a spectator, a ghost in my own home. The irony was bitter and almost unbearable. I remembered the countless Christmases I had organized, the hours spent in the kitchen, the effort I had poured into making the holidays magical. I remembered my own father, who had grown old and frail, and how I had wanted to be the kind of father my children could rely on. Yet, here I was, left out, my contributions unnoticed, my presence disregarded. I left without saying much, murmuring a polite goodbye, my mind racing. On the drive home, the snowflakes danced in the streetlights, each one reminding me of the fleeting nature of time, of moments that slip away before you can grasp them. I wondered if my children had even realized the depth of my disappointment, the sting of being left out of something that had always been the heart of our family. When I got home, I sat in my armchair, staring at the presents I had bought, still wrapped, still filled with love. I thought about calling them, demanding an explanation, but I knew it would only lead to arguments, to defensiveness. I didn't want to ruin their joy, even if they had ruined mine. The holidays were meant for love, for warmth, and I didn't want to taint that with bitterness. As the night wore on, I thought about my own life, about sacrifices made and joys given. I thought about the little moments that mattered most, the quiet laughter, the shared meals, the hands held in comfort. I realized that even if this Christmas had gone wrong, the memories I had created over the years were still mine. They could never take away the love I had given, the lessons I had taught, the patience I had shown. Yet, the hurt remained. It was not just about being excluded, it was about being invisible, about realizing that love and effort could be taken for granted. I wanted to scream, to demand recognition, but the words were trapped, replaced by a quiet, heavy sorrow. It was a lesson, cruel and sharp, about the fragility of relationships and the hidden complexities within a family. I thought about my wife, long gone, and how she would have reacted. She would have held my hand, whispered that everything would be okay, reminded me that love is not measured by a single night, but by years of devotion. I wished she were there, her presence a balm to the ache that throbbed within me. By midnight, the house was silent. The neighborhood had quieted, the festive lights casting long shadows across the snow. I sat by the window, looking out, watching the world celebrate without me, yet feeling a strange sense of clarity. Life, I realized, doesn't always follow the stories we imagine. Families, even ours, have their own rhythms, their own secrets, and sometimes those rhythms leave you behind. I thought about calling my children in the morning, about expressing my feelings, about opening a conversation that had been avoided for too long. But I also knew that the wound was fresh, the emotions raw. Patience, I reminded myself, patience. Sometimes the most profound love is shown not in grand gestures, but in quiet endurance. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, feeling the warmth seep into my hands, the aroma a small comfort in the cold solitude. I thought about the next Christmas, about how things might be different, or how they might not. Life doesn't give guarantees, only choices. And I chose, for now, to hold on to my dignity, to protect the love I had given, and to trust that someday, perhaps, understanding would follow. As dawn approached, the first light of Christmas morning painted the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. I watched it in silence, feeling the weight of loneliness and the quiet strength it demanded. Even in exclusion, there was a lesson, a reminder that life continues, that love persists, and that the heart can endure more than we imagine. The day stretched ahead, empty yet full of potential. I had the gifts, the food, the memories, and perhaps that was enough for now. I could start slowly, reach out, rebuild bridges that had been neglected, and find new ways to connect. Life had left room for forgiveness, for understanding, for a second chance. I didn't know what the next step would be. I didn't know if my children would understand the depth of my hurt or if they would see the love behind my silence. But I knew one thing: I had endured, and I would continue to endure. My presence, though unnoticed this Christmas, was not meaningless. My love, though unacknowledged, remained steadfast. And so I sat, the morning light spilling across the room, the snow outside reflecting a world that moved on without me, yet one in which I still had a place, even if that place had to be redefined. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, soft and fragile, as if unsure whether it should awaken me or let me linger in my quiet contemplation. I sat at the kitchen table, the gifts I had bought for my family neatly arranged in their boxes, a reminder of my intentions and my love, yet also of the invisible barrier that had been drawn between us. I poured another cup of coffee, its warmth a small solace in the lingering ache of exclusion. I looked at my phone, contemplating a message, a call, a gentle nudge toward reconciliation, but the fear of rejection held my fingers still. The room was silent except for the occasional creak of the apartment settling, a sound that seemed louder than usual in my solitude. I traced my fingers along the smooth surface of the table, thinking about the countless times my children had gathered around it, sharing laughter and stories, and how now, the echoes of those moments seemed like memories from another life. I remembered the way Michael used to light up when I surprised him with small treats or when I would join him for a movie night, how Laura would beam with pride at the cookies I had baked, the same ones I had hoped to share this Christmas. That warmth, that connection, felt distant and fragile now, like it could be swept away with the first gust of wind. I thought about reaching out, perhaps visiting, perhaps speaking directly about my feelings, but the words were heavy, weighed down with disappointment and vulnerability. How do you explain to your own children that you feel invisible in your own family, that your presence, your efforts, your love seem to have been quietly ignored? My mind wandered to my younger days, to Christmases filled with laughter and chaos, with gifts hastily wrapped and meals lovingly prepared, each moment a testament to my dedication as a father. I wondered how it had come to this, how a lifetime of devotion could be overshadowed by a single holiday, a single act of omission. The snow outside had begun to melt slightly, leaving puddles that reflected the pale winter sun. I stared at them, lost in thought, the reflection fragmented and wavering, much like my sense of belonging. The realization that my family had hidden this celebration from me was sharp and cold, cutting through the remnants of hope I had clung to. I began to tidy the apartment, a ritual that often brought me comfort. I straightened the cushions, wiped down the counters, and rearranged the chairs, attempting to impose some order on the chaos of my emotions. Each movement was deliberate, grounding me in the present, reminding me that I still had control over parts of my life, even if I had been excluded from parts that mattered deeply. The thought of sitting alone weighed heavily on me, yet there was a strange liberation in it. I didn't have to play the part of the happy, accommodating father right now. I didn't have to force laughter or hide the hurt behind a practiced smile. For the first time that Christmas, I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of my emotions, to acknowledge the pain, the anger, and the sorrow without masking them. As the morning progressed, I considered calling my grandchildren, not to scold or to complain, but simply to hear their voices. There was innocence in their laughter, a purity that had nothing to do with the conflicts of adulthood, and perhaps connecting with them could offer a bridge back to my children. I dialed the number, heart pounding, and waited as the line rang. Each ring felt like an eternity, each second amplifying the vulnerability I carried within me. When the call was answered by a small, cheerful voice, my chest lifted slightly. "Grandpa," they exclaimed, the joy unmistakable, and for a brief moment, the hurt receded, replaced by warmth and love. We talked about simple things, about snow, about the decorations they had made at school, about the little adventures they had shared with their friends. I laughed genuinely, and for the first time that morning, the apartment felt less cold, less empty. The conversation was a reminder that despite the fractures with my children, there were still connections that endured, bonds that couldn't be erased by distance or omission. After the call, I sat in contemplation, the silence returning but now carrying a softer weight. I thought about the path forward, about the difficult conversations that awaited, and the patience that would be required. Forgiveness was not immediate, understanding even less so, but the willingness to seek it, to open myself to dialogue, was a step I could take. I glanced at the gifts again, the neatly wrapped packages filled with thought and care. They represented not only material offerings but pieces of my heart, tokens of love that had been intended to bring joy. I wondered if one day they would understand the depth of what had been given, the sacrifices, the quiet devotion that often went unnoticed. Lunch came and went quietly, a simple meal I prepared. For myself. I thought about how I had once prepared elaborate feasts for my family, how the kitchen had been a place of warmth, activity, and connection. Now, cooking was a solitary act, yet even in its simplicity, it offered a sense of purpose, a way to honor the traditions I had cherished for decades. As afternoon approached, I considered taking a walk, to breathe in the crisp winter air, to let the cold remind me that life continued beyond the walls of my apartment. I bundled up, pulling on my coat and scarf, and stepped outside. The streets were quieter than usual, the snow crunching underfoot, the occasional car passing by with cheerful holiday music drifting from its windows. I wandered without a destination, letting my thoughts flow freely. I reflected on past holidays, on the laughter, the minor disputes, the small acts of kindness that had always punctuated our family life. I recalled moments when my children had sought my advice, when they had leaned on me for comfort, and realized that those memories were mine, untainted by the exclusion of today. Returning home as dusk fell, I felt the weight of the day settle around me once more. The sky was a deep indigo, dotted with stars that seemed indifferent to human affairs. I lit a small lamp, the soft glow filling the room, and sat back in my chair, letting the silence wash over me. I thought about tomorrow, about the conversations that would need to happen, the emotions that would need to be expressed. I imagined sitting down with Laura and Michael, trying to find words that would bridge the gap, that would convey not only my hurt but my enduring love. I knew it would be difficult, perhaps fraught with tension, yet necessary if we were to repair what had been damaged. The evening stretched on, and I began to write in my journal, the act of putting words to paper offering clarity and relief. I wrote about my feelings of exclusion, my observations, my memories, and my hopes for reconciliation. Each sentence felt like a small step toward understanding, a way to process the complex emotions that had been building for days. As I closed the journal, I realized that this Christmas, though marked by hurt and exclusion, had also revealed resilience, a capacity for reflection and endurance. I understood that family relationships were not static, that they required ongoing effort, communication, and sometimes, the courage to face uncomfortable truths. I sat quietly, watching the snowfall begin again outside, each flake a gentle reminder of the passage of time, of seasons changing, of opportunities to heal and rebuild. I knew that the story of this Christmas was far from over, that the chapters yet to be written would carry both challenge and hope. The night deepened, and I felt the first pangs of sleepiness. I wrapped myself in a warm blanket, letting the quietness of the apartment surround me. Despite the pain, despite the absence, there was a sense of continuity, a recognition that life and love endure in unexpected ways. Even as I drifted toward sleep, my mind lingered on possibilities, on the small gestures that could mend rifts, on the conversations that could foster understanding. I held on to the belief that the next Christmas, or even tomorrow, could bring moments of connection and reconciliation. The story remained unfinished, a living testament to the complexities of family, to the depth of human emotion, and to the quiet strength that persists even when one feels unseen. The night was long, but it carried with it a promise that, despite the challenges, there was always room for healing, for growth, and for love to find its way back into the heart of the family. The morning after, the world seemed quieter than usual, the streets blanketed in a layer of soft snow that absorbed sound and gave everything a hushed serenity. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, the steam curling up toward my face, a small comfort against the lingering weight in my chest. The apartment felt different in the light of day, the shadows retreating, leaving clarity in their place. I noticed little details I had overlooked before, the crooked picture frame on the wall, the worn spots on the carpet, the way the sunlight caught the dust particles in the air, giving them an almost ethereal glow. I thought about my children again, about the choices they had made, and about the consequences that rippled silently through our family. The sting of exclusion had not faded, yet beneath it lay a deeper understanding that life and relationships were complicated, fragile, and often unpredictable. I poured myself another cup of coffee and began to prepare a simple breakfast, each motion deliberate, grounding me in the present. The aroma of toast and coffee filled the apartment, a small echo of the warmth I had always tried to bring to my family's Christmases. As I ate, I reflected on past holidays, the joy, the chaos, the moments of connection that had built the foundation of our family. I realized that these memories were mine to keep, a treasure that could not be taken away, even if the present had been shadowed by exclusion. The phone rang, and I answered hesitantly, unsure who it would be. It was Michael, his voice tentative, unsure. "Dad, we wanted to talk," he said, the words awkward, yet carrying a hint of concern. I felt a flicker of hope, a chance to bridge the gap that had formed. We spoke slowly, carefully, navigating around the hurt, testing the waters with small questions and cautious statements. I listened as he explained, as best he could, their perspective, their intentions, the reasons for the choices that had excluded me. Some of it I understood, some of it left me still grappling with confusion and pain, yet the act of communication itself was a balm, a recognition that I still mattered. We ended the call with no clear resolution, but a promise to continue talking, a commitment that even in the shadow of hurt, we would strive toward understanding. The air felt lighter, the apartment less confining, and I sensed a faint, cautious optimism in my heart. Afterward, I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, to breathe in the crisp air, to let the world remind me that life moved forward even amid personal trials. The snow crunched under my boots, the sound steady and grounding, a rhythm to match the quiet thrum of my thoughts. I thought about my grandchildren again, about their laughter, their innocence, the light they brought into my life. I considered small gestures, small acts of connection that might reach them even when the adults were hesitant, that could remind them of the bond we shared. Returning home, I spent time sorting through the gifts I had bought, making notes about which ones might reach their intended recipients, which could be delivered with care and thoughtfulness in the days ahead. The act felt purposeful, a way to maintain a sense of agency, to reclaim a fragment of the holiday I had been denied. The day passed in a quiet rhythm, punctuated by calls, reflections, and small moments of connection. I found comfort in my routines, in the simple acts of preparing meals, tending to the apartment, and writing in my journal. Each task, each note, each moment of reflection offered a measure of control and a chance to process the complex emotions swirling within me. As evening approached, I lit a few candles, their gentle flicker casting soft shadows on the walls. The light was comforting, a small hearth in my otherwise quiet home. I thought about my children once more, about Laura's guarded smile, Michael's tentative words, and the opportunities that lay ahead to mend the fissures that had appeared in our family. I sipped tea, letting the warmth fill me, feeling the solitude not as punishment but as space for contemplation and planning. I considered reaching out again, about finding moments to share my feelings without confrontation, to express love without expectation, to plant seeds of understanding that might grow over time. The snow began again, falling softly against the windows, each flake a tiny whisper from the world outside, a reminder that life continued, that seasons changed, and that hope could still be nurtured even in the quietest of moments. I took out my journal, writing once more about the events, the emotions, the reflections that had emerged over the past days. I wrote about the hope that remained, the connections that endured, and the possibilities that tomorrow might bring. Each word felt like a step forward, a bridge toward healing, a recognition that even amid exclusion, love and effort could persist. Night settled in, the world outside muted and still. I wrapped myself in a blanket, letting the quiet embrace me, feeling both the weight of my hurt and the faint glow of cautious optimism. I considered the days ahead, the conversations, the small gestures, the moments that might rebuild trust and understanding. I allowed myself to imagine different scenarios, paths toward reconciliation, ways to connect with my children and grandchildren despite the hurt. The exercise was not without pain, yet it offered direction, a sense that my actions and choices could influence the narrative moving forward. The apartment grew colder as the night deepened, but I felt a warmth in the persistence of my thoughts, in the recognition that even when unseen, my love remained constant. I reviewed the gifts again, thinking of how I might distribute them, not as a show of defiance, but as an act of care, a way to remind my family of the bond we shared. I imagined their reactions, the small sparks of surprise or delight, the moments of connection that could emerge from the ordinary. I spent hours reflecting, writing, planning, and breathing, letting the quiet of the apartment carry me through the night. The hurt was still present, raw and tangible, yet mingled with a resolve to maintain dignity, to honor my own feelings, and to nurture the connections that still mattered. By the early hours, exhaustion settled over me, but so did a sense of purpose. The story of this Christmas, though marked by exclusion, was still unfolding, and I was determined to play my part in shaping its next chapters. Sleep came slowly, my thoughts drifting between memories and possibilities, between hurt and hope, a delicate balance that would carry me into the days to come. I understood that the journey toward reconciliation would be neither simple nor immediate, yet it was one I was willing to take. The night was long and still, filled with potential, with unspoken words, with opportunities for understanding and connection. Even in the quiet solitude, I felt the stirring of plans, of intentions, of steps that might lead toward the restoration of warmth and love within my family. As the snow continued to fall outside, I closed my eyes, letting the silence envelop me, knowing that this story was far from finished, that the next chapters would be written through patience, courage, and the enduring strength of a father's love. The dawn would come, as it always does, carrying with it new possibilities, and I resolved to meet it with the quiet determination that had carried me through decades of life, knowing that even in absence, the morning light came gently, spilling across the floor and filling the apartment with a soft glow. I stirred from sleep feeling a calm I hadn't known for days, the heaviness in my chest still present but tempered by the quiet clarity that had settled over me. After preparing a modest breakfast, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, thinking about the events of the past few days and the path that had led me here. I realized that despite the hurt, despite the exclusion, I still had choices: to nurture patience, to open myself to understanding, and to reach out with love instead of anger. I picked up my phone and saw a message from Laura, tentative and simple: "Dad, can we talk later today? We want to make things right." A sense of warmth spread through me. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase the hurt, but it was a bridge, an acknowledgement of the pain and a willingness to mend it. I responded carefully, choosing words that expressed both my hope and my feelings. "Yes, let's talk. I'd like that." The day moved slowly, punctuated by quiet reflections and small tasks around the apartment. I arranged the gifts I had prepared, thinking about how I might deliver them, not as a confrontation, but as an act of love. By the afternoon, Laura and Michael arrived, their faces marked with nervous anticipation, the tension in their movements betraying their own vulnerability. I greeted them quietly, a simple nod and a gentle smile, letting them know that my love was still present and unshaken. We sat together in the living room, the silence stretching for a few moments before Laura spoke, her voice tinged with remorse. "Dad, we're sorry. We made a mistake. We should never have excluded you. It wasn't right." Michael nodded, his expression serious. "We didn't think about how it would make you feel. You've always done so much for us, and we forgot the most important part, having you there with us." I listened, taking in their words, feeling the weight of their remorse and the sincerity in their voices. I let myself acknowledge the hurt that had built over the past days, but I also recognized the opportunity for healing that had just arrived. "I appreciate you saying that," I said softly. "It hurt to be left out, I won't deny it. But I also know that we can still make this right. Love isn't erased by mistakes, and neither is family." The conversation unfolded gradually, carefully, as we spoke about our feelings, our misunderstandings, and the ways we could reconnect. Emotions ran high at times, tears were shed, and laughter emerged in between, fragile but genuine. It was not perfect, but it was real, and it was a start. After some time, we moved to the gifts. I handed each present carefully, explaining the thought behind each one, the love embedded in every choice. We shared stories, memories, and small jokes, the atmosphere slowly warming, filling with a sense of connection that had been absent for too long. We prepared a simple meal together, the kitchen alive with movement and conversation. There was no grand celebration, no perfection, just the honest, human interactions that made Christmas meaningful. I watched my children and grandchildren move about, sharing smiles and laughter, and felt the quiet satisfaction of seeing love expressed naturally. As evening approached, we sat around the small Christmas tree, the soft glow of the lights reflecting in our eyes. There was an understanding now, unspoken but felt deeply, that the bonds of family were resilient, capable of withstanding hurt and disappointment if tended with care and patience. We spoke about the future, about plans and hopes, and how we could prevent misunderstandings like this from happening again. There was a sense of renewal, of commitment to one another, a promise that the love and effort invested over the years would not be taken for granted again. The night deepened, and the apartment settled into a peaceful quiet, the snow outside glimmering softly under the streetlights. I sat back in my chair, content, feeling the blend of emotion, relief, and love that only comes from genuine connection. In that moment, I realized that while hurt had been part of our story, so too was forgiveness, understanding, and the enduring nature of family bonds. We had navigated the pain, faced our feelings, and found a path toward reconciliation that felt real and meaningful. As we said our goodbyes for the night, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced since before the holiday began. I knew there would be more moments to mend, more conversations to be had, but the foundation had been laid, the first steps taken. I looked out at the falling snow, each flake a reminder of life's fragility and beauty, of the impermanence of moments, and of the importance of cherishing love while it exists. The apartment felt full, not just with people or gifts, but with the shared human experience of connection, understanding, and forgiveness. That Christmas, though it had begun with pain and exclusion, ended with a quiet, profound realization that family is not defined by perfection, but by the willingness to care, to forgive, and to remain present for one another. And as I sat in the soft glow of the lamp, reflecting on the day, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the chance to repair, to reconnect, and to embrace the love that had always been there, waiting quietly, patiently, to be acknowledged once more.